It comes as no surprise to me that my most recent video concerning God, and people pray to this incompetent, received criticism. Nor does it surprise me that the criticism took three forms. Firstly, there were the personal insults, which I have no intention of addressing. Secondly, there were those that suggested that I was reading the Bible too literally. And thirdly, it was suggested that I had not taken the concept of free will into account. In making this video, I am also provided with an opportunity to include material which time prohibited me from doing in the previous video, namely, why prayer is dangerous. But before coming to that point, let me deal with the other issues. As I said, I do not intend to deal with the purely personal insults, so let's move on to the next point. Namely, that I have read the Bible too literally and failed to appreciate that parts of it are metaphorical or allegorical. I find this to be a weak argument, and I'll address it in the following way. Firstly, I defy anyone who seeks to advance that argument to come up with a set of objective criteria from which it can be decided which aspects of the Bible are literal, which are metaphorical, and which are allegorical. I do not believe that anyone will be able to do so. From which it follows that the determination of which parts of the Bible to accept as literal truth are determined by subjective criteria. In other words, you select those parts that suit your beliefs, or, to put it in another way, you cherry-pick. If anyone is bold enough to accept my challenge and state clearly what objective criteria are used in determining those aspects of the Bible that should be considered true and those which are not, I'd be interested in hearing from them. Because I suspect that in doing so, you will find that you slide down a path from which it is difficult to recover. I also suspect that I would be able to use those criteria to conclude that any reliance on any aspect of the Bible is unwarranted, even the very first sentence. And if you can't rely upon the first sentence, the very foundation stone of religion crumbles, and all that follows it collapses too. As for free will, so far as I understand it, the argument runs along these lines. Man was gifted free will by God. Man therefore has the power to control and influence circumstances. Man can use that freedom for good or evil, and evil results from the improper use by man of that freedom. Therefore it is man's misuse of free will that has led to all the evil in the world, not God. There are two general forms to this argument. The first is, God is all-powerful and omnipotent, and having granted the man the gift of free will, he decided not to interfere with the worldly affairs if man abused that gift. The second form of the argument is that whilst God is omnipotent, insofar as being the most powerful entity in the universe, man possesses some power which cannot be completely overridden, withdrawn, or vetoed by anyone, including God. The end result of both these forms of the argument remains the same, namely that it is man's misuse of free will that leads to all the evil in the world. I find these arguments to be utterly facile. It would be too easy to dismiss them by saying that a proposition without evidence can be dismissed without evidence, however true that fact may be. But the position is that it would be equally valid to say that man is evil because he is made in God's image, and therefore God is evil. In fact, far from being equally valid, this proposition has more weight. We know that God is a bloodthirsty murderer, guilty of global genocide and the death of over 2.3 million other people. But let's look at the proposition in a bit more detail. Let's take as our starting point that God created everything, and God's creation was perfect, or at least very good, as he himself stated. And what caused all the problems was that Eve was tempted by the serpent. Let us not forget that the angels, including Lucifer, were created by God before man, so it can be conclusively argued that evil existed before man, and as God created everything, God created evil. So much as the apologists will seek to argue that evil is a result of an abuse of God's gift of free will, the fact remains that He, God, created evil before man, that He created man with the trait of temptation and the means by which he could be tempted, and the consequences, evil, that would result from him succumbing to that temptation. It doesn't matter that the character flaw is temptation, or another flaw that led to temptation. Like Russian dolls, there comes a time when you will ultimately have to admit that there was a design flaw, God's design flaw. However you approach the issue, I fail to see how you cannot reach the conclusion that God's original creation, despite His words to the contrary, was not perfect. Further, as I stated in my previous video, He clearly seems to appreciate that fact as well. Otherwise, why would He continually seek to rectify the mess that resulted from His original work? By that I mean, why did He attempt to wipe the canvas clean and start again when He committed global genocide? Why did He attempt to remove the sinful by demolishing Sodom and Gomorrah? Why did He seek to give guidance to mankind by giving Moses the 10 Commandments? Why did He decide to select a portion of mankind to be His chosen people? Why did He send His Son down to earth to try and sort things out? And why, in the minds of many, does He still seek, or in their view succeed, to interfere with worldly affairs? For example, when, in 1981, the head of the Catholic Church itself, Pope John Paul II, was the subject of an unsuccessful assassination attempt, he put his survival down to Our Lady of Fatima. In other words, he considered that God, or more accurately, a servant of God, was responsible for his survival. There are many other instances of people who claim that God still influences worldly events, such as those that were involved in the Hudson River plane crash. The majority of the survivors of that incident put down their escape from almost certain death to the intervention of a divine hand, as opposed to the skill of the pilot flying the plane.
39 hit birds, we've lost thrust on both engines, returning back towards LaGuardia.
Okay, you need to return to LaGuardia. Turn left heading up 220.
220.
Tower, stop your departures, got emergency returning. It's 1529. He bird strike, he lost all engine, he lost the thrust in the engines, he's returning immediately.
Cactus 1529, which engines?
He lost thrust in both engines, he said.
Got it.
Cactus 1529, we can get it for you. Do you want to try to land runway 13?
We're unable. We may end up in the Hudson.
Alright, Cactus 15.9, it's going to be left traffic to runway 31.
Unable.
Okay, what do you need to land? Do you want to try to go to Teterboro?
Yes.
Teterboro, Empire, actually LaGuardia departure guy, emergency inbound.
Hey, got
Cactus 1529 over the George Washington Bridge, wants to go to the airport right now.
wants to go to our airport. Check. Does he need assistance?
Yes, it was a bird strike. Can I get him in for runway 1?
Runway 1, that's good.
Cactus 1529, turn right 280, you can land runway 1 at Teterboro.
We can't do it.
Okay, which runway would you like at Teterboro?
We're going to be in the Hudson.
I'm sorry, say again, Cactus? Cactus 1549, radar contact is lost. You also got Newark Airport up at 2 o'clock in about 7 miles.
The purpose of this video, and the last one, was to show that God is not great. His creation was not perfect. Finally, I want to finish with one point. Why prayer is dangerous. I think that these accounts speak for themselves.